Welcome to the BAknowledgeshare. In this episode, I'm so honored to talk to Nisha Talagala. Hi, Nisha, and welcome to the BAknowledgeshare podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
Awesome. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you became interested in AI?
Sure. So my background is in classic computer science. I got my degree and master's and PhD in computer science, but I've always been interested in AI. So I first built AIs when I was in, a senior in college and then, a graduate student. And we didn't have many of the technologies that we have now, but my interest in AI was always there. I actually did my PhD on clustered and distributed computing, but then, and I've worked in industry for a long time, and I've also worked at the intersection of industry and academia for a long time. And then about 8 years ago, I decided to sort of pursue my interest in AI formally. And I founded a company that basically built the first machine learning operations platform. So we actually coined the term MLOps, and I wrote the first MLOps Wikipedia entry. And that was back when, AI was even earlier than it is now, and companies were just starting to understand how to put AI into production and actually make it impactful for business. So that company was acquired by DataRobot in 2019, and I wanted to, continue my passion for AI, but wanted to focus more on the education space. So I've co-founded AI Club, which is an education technology company, and we focus on AI literacy. And we actually teach everyone from we call it 8 to 80, but essentially we teach, everyone from students to professionals. In the last few years, we've developed a very robust K through 12 program, but we've also taught quite a few professionals as well. So that's what I do.
That's incredible. And especially in the area of education, that is so important for folks to understand what is AI and what are its use cases. So really kudos to you for taking that step. And speaking about AI, like what are some of the biggest challenges businesses face when implementing AI, and how can they overcome them?
Sure. So I think, AI, there's a lot of excitement about AI, and, and all the businesses kind of like, and the applicability has been shown in pretty much every industry. And so there's definitely a lot of excitement about adopting it. But I have seen in my experiences, both, currently as well as in the past, that, businesses sometimes it's hard for them to go from the excitement to what I would call return on investment, right? Of actually, we've got it, it's working, it's generating positive returns. And it comes from a number of things. One is kind of like a misunderstanding of what it takes to be successful. So like a simple thing like, adding AI to your problem does not automatically make your situation better. You have to have a very clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish and why you think AI is going to help you, and have like a very, kind of crisp and critical view of what success looked like before AI. And what exactly would you want AI to do better? Is it that you will have the same number of sales, but at less cost? Is it that you will have more sales? Is it that you will have a more efficient delivery? But, be very precise about what you're trying to accomplish. And if you're not in a position to measure that, it will be very difficult for you to know whether you're being successful. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that taking AI from, concept to production does require a special set of skills. This was something that many companies didn't really know, like say 5 years ago, but now much more companies know. So, when we started MLOps, for example, people really didn't know what kind of, issues you might run into. There were companies like Google, that knew, of course, they've been doing it for years, but the average enterprise did not know, or the average, small business definitely did not know. Now MLOps is much more pervasive. There are, you can learn about it. You can hire an MLOps engineer whose specialty it is to transition technologies into production. And so now it's much more viable. The third is that there is a bit of a cultural shift. In order to make an AI successful or generate revenue on investment, return on investment from AI, you do need a lot of people to collaborate. Your engineers, your data scientists, your product managers, right?
Yeah.
Your user training, all of that has to come together in order to make this integration successful. And companies, again, have, struggled with it, but they are now learning that the kind of team structure, organizational structure that is required to enable everyone with their diverse points of view to come together and collaborate, under a common, definition of success and a common metric for success. So those are some of the things.
Great. And you brought up a good point. And you don't need a lot of folks to make a project successful or AI project successful. That's a very interesting fact, because when we talk about software development, initially it was SDLC, waterfall, and the change was agile. Now it's something very agile-ish probably, but minimal number of people, which is interesting, as well as the fact that you brought up those 3 points. It's good to know that. In your opinion, what are some of the most exciting developments happening in AI right now? We've heard about ChatGPT. There's other sort of AIs happening, but apart from that, like, what are some of the trends and patterns that you're seeing?
So I think the key thing is that, I think that perhaps the thing to maybe think about is not necessarily ChatGPT, the actual service, but the technology that underpins it. So ChatGPT is it's the most recent and also very impressive, but it's the recent public manifestation of an area of AI technology called large language models. So
Wow.
fundamentally, large language models are models that can understand is a strong word. They can process and find patterns in text. And this can be text like the transcript of this call, It could be a book that you download, it could be Wikipedia, it could be Reddit, it could be, pretty much anything. And what made these technologies super powerful is that they are a class of technologies that do not require what's called labeling. So I'll give you a simple example. Like supposing my goal was to determine whether a person should get a loan or not, right? Then I would have historical data. Here's a person, they got a loan. It was a successful loan. They paid it back, and so forth. Here's a person, they got a loan. It was not successful. They defaulted. So every one of those data points needs to have a clear answer of what happened in the past. And sometimes those answers have to be gathered, provided by humans, right? You have to find the records. It's hard. Now, one of the nice things about these language models is that they fundamentally learn by completing sentences. So you give them a sentence and they already know the completion because you have the whole sentence. And then they learn how to complete it. So this is a class. So any data that does not require humans to really say, okay, what was the right answer this time, right? Any data that can figure out for itself the right answer, there's just so much easier to, acquire masses of data.
Nice.
So one of it is that it's language, and so language is everywhere. The second is that it has this self, it doesn't require explicit labeling. So technology, and that's not unique to large language models, by the way. There are many techniques out there that do that. But that has created, it's called semi-supervised or unsupervised, and it has created this massive growth of the amount of data that you can bring to bear for an AI. So one of the things that's very hard for companies many times is if they want to solve a problem, chances are somewhere in the company there is data about this problem, but the data wasn't gathered at a time when you thought there would be an AI.
Yeah.
Some of the data could be in a filing cabinet somewhere. Literally, some of it is like we have it, but we don't know where it is.
Yep.
We have the customer records of the loans, but we don't have the customer records of whether they paid them back, right? It's just a massive pain to get that stuff together. And then the net result is the amount of data you can get together is small.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can just shove anything and everything into it and it figures out things,
Yeah.
it's just so much easier to gather information. So that's one of the key trends, and it is occurring not just in in languages, but it's occurring in other domains as well, where you can kind of like perform this sort of discovery. The other thing is that there is an ecosystem building up. So, for example, there are many labeling companies out there now. For self-driving cars. For self-driving cars have to recognize everything from a tree to a bicycle to
Right.
some strange animal that you would never expect to see outside of a zoo, but for some reason is now on your road, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there are companies that will just literally label scenes for you for a living, or even simulate scenes that you're never actually seeing on the road.
Wow.
So for mainstream applications, you can do that. But you cannot do that for private applications, like your company's private data. You're not going to hire a third-party labeling company.
Right.
They won't even understand the data, much less be able to label it. So there's all these kinds of challenges. And so some of the new trends are that there are these AIs emerging that require very little of this kind of stuff. And that's very powerful.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. I'm sorry, you were saying.
And I mean, there are many others. I mean, AI is no shortage of, fascinating trends, but that's one of those. The other is that, AI has shown, promise in all sorts of interesting problem solving approaches, everything from math to strategy, right? To so forth. And so I think people are still kind of discovering the kinds of problems they can solve with it. So
are you talking about solving problems or identifying problems?
Good question. So I'll give you an example. I mean,
Yeah.
AIs can now generate new candidate drugs faster than any human.
Oh, wow.
If you look at the drug discovery pipeline, the drug discovery pipeline is very, very expensive because even coming up with a new drug, right? Basically, in order to create a drug, you have to essentially say, okay, I hypothesize that if I can manufacture this particular sequence of, chemicals into a compound, then it will enter the body under this delivery, make itself an attachment, right?
Yeah.
To this particular protein, and that will cause some behavioral change that is positive.
Mm-hmm.
So previously, before AI got involved, this was done by essentially the best human experts in the world would gather in a room and they would pull out of their brains the top 10 chemicals they could think of, and then we would go off and test them. Now an AI can churn out from all the possible combinations of chemicals, here's the ones that I think are most
Wow.
likely to have a positive interaction with this protein, that RNA strand, this, that, right?
Yeah, wow.
And then the labs can go ahead and evaluate experimentally the ones the AI thought was most likely, because that experimentation is so expensive. And so if
Wow.
you can have a good candidate go into the pipeline, it's the reason that drug discovery is so expensive is not because the one that succeeds it's because of the ones that fail. And until they go through the cycle, you don't know that they're going to fail, right? So the better the quality of the thing that goes in, the less likely, the
Yeah,
less
yeah.
cost of the thing that comes out.
Yeah, no, that's
an example.
that's interesting, right? Because there's so much savings there, right there, that specific example that you provided. And it's fascinating to see where this is headed. And my next question, you touched upon it briefly, right? So the future of AI, like what does it look in the next 5 to 10 years? Like right now, we're just seeing the introduction of AI to the general public, but being on the inside, being in the industry, what do you think is coming up down the road 5 to 10 years from now?
I think there's a number of things. I think we're headed for, I honestly, the world is always in the middle of a massive transformation, right? And so I
True.
think it's overkill to say that this is one and we haven't had one before.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that what has happened, so the key thing I think is that the AIs you see around us, including chat, are nothing compared to the ones you don't see. The ones that are being used behind the scenes to design drugs for you, make decisions
Yeah.
about policy, make decisions about who gets parole in a prison, who doesn't, right?
Wow. Yeah.
There was nothing. I think ChatGPT may be the first time when what you see is as powerful as what you don't see. What you don't see is also getting more powerful by the day. So one of the fundamental things that I think is that there is a transformation about job skills and the kind of skills that you need. And from my role in the education, fundamentally, what are the things that you should be learning? So I heard a quote earlier this week, which I thought was really good, is that AI is going to transform education from what you know to who you are.
Oh, wow. Okay. So let's slow down on that, right? So what you know to who you are.
So,
okay.
So for example, there was a time, before technology became ramping up so quickly, is that what you knew, what you learned in school was enough to power you for the rest of your life. Like, you trained to be a doctor, you became a doctor. Maybe you had you had periodic retrainings.
Right.
But for the last part, your life will be about being a doctor, right?
Yeah.
Even before AI showed up, if you're in computer science, you know that computer languages are always changing. Technologies are changing. Products are changing. So whatever you learned on in school is most likely not the technology you're using today.
True.
Right. So that was always something that computer science people and, or anybody in the technology industry just had to internalize, is that learning is a lifelong exercise.
Right.
AI has made that much more aggressive. So if you look at a lot of these AIs, like ChatGPT, for example, they are amazing co-pilots. So if you know what you're doing, it can just save so much time for you. If you don't know what you're doing, you may not know to ask the right question. And it's not psychic, so it can't tell you what you are trying to learn.
Right.
And so technologies, these AIs are amazing assistants to people who know what they're doing, which means that your ability to sort of use the tool. And I don't mean prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is more of a low level. What I mean
I was going to get into that prompt engineering. Okay, go ahead.
So what I'm saying is more like if think about it from the point of view of an employer, right? An employer hires a person to solve a problem fundamentally. The more junior the employee, the more specific the problem.
True.
The more senior the employee, the vaguer the problem. Like if you're hiring like a head of AI and analytics for a major corporation, that person's job is to make the company successful in AI. Their boss is not going to tell them how to do that.
Right.
Right. And they have to figure out, oh, this means I have to convince this guy of something. I have to train these people. I have to buy this thing from this vendor. I have to get these people to generate a roadmap, right?
Yep.
So from problem to strategy to execution comes from the brain of the human. And so when I say who you are you resourceful, right? Are you persistent? Are you persuasive, right? Are you sufficiently knowledgeable that you can make good use of any tool out there, but at the same time sufficiently, knowledgeable that you know how to not break the law and get your company sued
Right.
while you're doing it. So if you are that person, it's who you are. What you may have learned yesterday, what you may have learned in college is no longer relevant.
So it also gets in, I'm diverting a little bit from my questions, but it also gets into understanding not just the books, right? In a classroom, it's understanding, having those soft skills, having the skills to constantly learn and be curious and all that whole package.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so I think that like I was at the PyCon conference yesterday, so the Python conference, and one of the questions, and it's a legitimate question that was being asked is, do we still need to teach people to code? And it's a really interesting question because the answer is not obvious. I mean, I personally feel the answer is still yes, but maybe not for the reasons we used to think of, right? Like the coding syntax, I'm not sure matters anymore, but at the same time, coding isn't just about learning syntax. It's also about learning how to problem solve. It's about learning how to imagine and then, be able to create what you imagined into something solid that somebody else can try. So those skills still have to be there in people. But like one of the questions that we may need to ask ourselves is actually like have a conversation with employers, an ongoing conversation that says, okay, what is it that you need now in an employee?
Yep.
Then turn around and say, are we teaching that thing?
Yeah.
So rather than saying, okay, we have assessments, we have a test, and our job is to teach the students to do well on the test, maybe we have to honestly step back from all of that and say, okay, our goal is to get people employed. Our goal is to feed the workforce, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What
And
does it take to feed the workforce?
exactly. It's be it in the classroom, what does it take to be a successful student for the future? Also, what does it take to be a successful employee, and getting that feedback from, and sometimes employers may not know either, right? So it's really broadening that view and just resourcing and creating resources for
And
yourself.
also just keep talking, right? Because we don't know.
Yeah.
Teachers don't know, employers don't know, frankly, they don't know because they don't know what they will need in the next few years. But at the same time, if you keep talking, then maybe you figure it out.
Yeah, and a lot of the folks in the business analysis community, it's the same question. The burning question is, what's going to happen to business analysts? Well, things are going to evolve. It's probably a very gradual cycle of evolution, right? This may not be business analysis as in a box. You're probably going to have to broaden your horizons and look at other angles. There might be some new stuff as well. Let's talk about a little bit about ethics and AI. It's a broad topic. So, asking specific questions is sort of, in general, what do you think about ethics and AI?
I think ethics is a very, very major challenge in AI. And the more pervasive the AI becomes, the bigger the challenge. And as you said, ethics is not one thing. Ethics is so many things, right? So like one of the things that is, so if you work from like planet down, right, instead of individual up, planet down, there is an arms race going on right now in AI. Countries are realizing that their ability to compete, their ability to maybe even safeguard their citizenry, right, is going to depend on their AI competence. What is this translating into? They are protecting their AI technology. They're training their citizens as fast as they can. And eventually they will start protecting their data if they haven't done it already, because data is where good AI comes from. Who owns the data owns the AI. So that's one, right? Is that there are these arms races. Now, the next question is going to be, AIs can be quite damaging. For example, the AI technology that can generate new drugs, similar technology can easily generate new chemical weapons. It has been proven. A researcher proved that he could get an AI to generate 40,000 chemical weapons in 6 hours.
Wow.
And he basically put it out there and said, be worried, be very worried. Now, the real question is, if you have countries that are competing like mad, are they going to be willing to come together to regulate something across nations, right? For the things that can cause trouble. And so so I'm writing a Forbes article right now, which I'm hoping to publish today, is essentially about analogies. And one of the analogies is nuclear power, nuclear technologies. If you think about nuclear technology, right, the core essence of nuclear technology powers, many homes around the world. It's also the technology that generated the bomb, that created Chernobyl, and so there are these sort of, humans decide whether technology goes the good route or the bad route.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes us many years as a planet to come together.
Yeah.
To figure it out. And we sometimes race. I mean, there was a nuclear race, right? For a long time. I mean, everybody built it. And then fortunately, before we destroyed our planet, we generally figured out that we probably shouldn't start firing these at each other.
Yeah.
Right. At the same time, this is not a solved problem. All you have to do is to go to the news any given day, and you know that somewhere in the world, this is still an issue. Right. So I expect there'll be a similar kind of thing. And I think, there'll be a lot of good. And unfortunately, it's possible there will be one or two very bad incidents too.
Okay.
We all realize that this is serious. So
yeah, I look. Yeah, go ahead.
So that's the ethical issue at the planet level.
Sure.
Now, if you go all the way down, there's questions like, is my Alexa listening to me?
Yep.
What exactly does it know about me? Do I want it to know that kind of thing about me? I don't remember, agreeing to that. And then there's lots of, issues like, are companies selling data about you? Like exactly how much? There's deep fakes where,
yeah,
we can no longer trust our eyes because videos can now be beautifully faked. So there's lots and lots of issues that hit all over the place. And that's part of the reason why the ethical dilemma is so, complex, is because it is so multifaceted.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was reading an article, and a lot of the CEOs of Microsoft and Google are encouraging the government to put in regulations. Because I can only imagine they're seeing these ethical dilemmas popping up and potentially not potentially, will be popping up down the road. And I really look forward to reading your article as well that you post in Forbes. What advice would you give someone just starting out in the field of AI?
Yeah, so I think this is, so first of all, I wrote another Forbes piece earlier in the year, which turned out to be prescient. I said 2023 will be the year of AI education. And I think that is clearly turning out to be true. And so and so I talked to so many people from, all walks of life, all professions, who are saying, okay, apparently now I have to actually deal with this AI thing. I've had it on my to-do list for a long time. I probably need to learn this, but now suddenly, ChatGPT has landed on my head, and now I really have to know what's going on. I think the first thing is to really try to understand what your personal goals are. And not to be too overwhelmed, because the problem with AI is that a lot of people come across this issue. They're flooded with articles. Oh my God, it's going to change the world. It's going to cost me my job. It's going to, it's going to save the planet. It's going to destroy the planet. All of them keep coming. Then I Google for it and I end up with some equation. I don't know why this equation is there. I don't want to learn it. I don't know what it's doing. I don't even know if it's important. And so somehow suddenly I went from over here to over here in the matter of a blink. And my goal is to really be somewhere in the middle. I don't really want to, I don't want to be in the hype world. I also have no intention of being a mathematician ever. Right. And so that middle ground is what everybody is struggling with. And I think it really does help to, to kind of understand for yourself, what is it that you are trying to learn and what is your purpose? So I'll give you an example, perhaps for your users. If the question is, how is this going to change my job as an analyst? The way I would recommend that is, first of all, try to learn the tools that people are saying are useful for analysts. Find out what they are, go and try them out. One of the beauties of the AI space is almost everything is at least free for trial. Try it out, and then one of two things is going to happen. The three things. One is you might find it's completely useless. Okay, fine, move on, right? The other is maybe it helps you do your job faster. In that case, be proactive, adopt it, talk to your company, see if it's okay. If they think it's okay, then try to adopt it, because it makes you a better version of yourself. It makes you more valuable to your employer. The second one is, if you do believe that this tool will eventually replace you, actually look at it clear-eyed and say, you know what, I'm sorry, but this tool is going to eventually replace me. then it's time to really think about learning something else. Like, don't wait until the tool replaces you. Don't freak out.
Right.
Just look at it clearly. And if that is the case, then move on.
Yeah, there was this whole debate, should I be a specialist versus a generalist, right? And I think being a specialist, as long as it look at it with clear eyes, makes sense, then yeah, I mean, if you're a generalist, right, if you're going down that path, then there was this interesting article, like you can combine biology with analysis or data analytics. There's so many permutations and combinations that you can create. It does take some work. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Just finally, like, what's next for you? And you've done so much work in this field. And you're contributing so much in education. Are there any exciting projects or initiatives that you're working on that you can tell us about?
Sure. So actually, one of the things that, we haven't talked a lot about, but we have been doing for some time, but now we're going to do it at a much larger scale, is we are educating professionals. And so that thing I described about, you hear all the news at the top, but then when you go looking, you find some ridiculous thing at the bottom, right?
Right.
Everybody's journey is somewhere in the middle, and everybody's journey is somehow personalized to them. And so we are launching an initiative. We're calling it AI Club Pro, where we're creating personalized learning paths for professionals.
Okay.
So the idea is that, we will meet with, and by the way, we're already doing this. We just haven't announced it. Sometimes it's an individual, sometimes it's a team, sometimes it's a company where essentially, different teams come in. But the basic idea is that through a consultation process, we learn the objective that the person, the team has. What is it they're trying to accomplish in their job? And then we create a personalized learning path for them to navigate them through the noise, and they pick up the skills they want. They don't need to worry about the skills they don't want right now. And so everything from, are you specializing in a particular industry, to, are you going to be a coder? Do you want to be a coder, right? You want to learn AI without necessarily coding? These are the things that people have difficulty navigating for themselves and their teams. So that's an initiative that we're very excited about. And I think we've seen very positive response right now.
Cool.
Because to your point, everybody needs to learn. We all have these questions.
Yeah. Yeah. How do they get more information about that?
So we'll launch shortly, but if you just email me, I'll put my email address.
Sure.
On the chat. Yeah, they can just email me for now. And yeah. And once we launch, we already have clients. We just haven't publicized the fact that we do this.
Cool.
And our clients basically are, basically enterprise companies, over 100 million in revenue. And the individuals are everyone from, VPs of engineering to CEOs to directors of the board to product managers. And you can see how they all need to learn different things.
Correct.
Right. And so that reflects,
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So is there anything else that you would like to bring up to the audience? Or any last words?
Yeah, I think no, this has been wonderful. I hope that your audience finds this helpful.
I'm sure they
Feel
will.
free to connect them with me if they have any questions or anything like that. I am trying to write more often on the topic. So, you can just Google for my name and Forbes. I usually put most of my articles there.
Yep.
So if they're interested in following on this topic, they can, try to follow me there.
Yeah, and I'll include your information as well in the show notes, so people can get a hold of you. I appreciate your time, Nisha. This has been a very fascinating conversation, and thank you so much. And I hope you can join me in the next couple of months or in a year. I'd love to touch base with you.
Absolutely. Same here.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for
Thank
having me.
you.